Guys, they got him. They got the piece of shit that killed Jay. As I have reported on my channel earlier, there was a member of Patriot Prayer named Jay who was killed in cold blood by an Antifa member. And just the last hour or so ago, suspect in fatal Portland shooting is killed by officers during arrest. Law enforcement agents killed Michael Forrest, I don't know how to pronounce that, Carnal, while trying to arrest him, for officials said he was being investigated in the fatal shooting of a supporter of a far-right group. Patriot Prayer is not far-right, they're patriotic Americans. What the hell? An Antifa supporter being investigated in the fatal shooting of a right-wing activist who was part of a pro-Trump caravan in Portland, Oregon, was killed on Thursday night when authorities moved to arrest him. Lieutenant Ray Brady of the Thurston County Sheriff's Office said in an interview that the law enforcement team was in the area looking for a homicide suspect. He didn't confirm it was Mr. Carnal. That's how I'm going to say his name, because that's ridiculous. And that the suspect exited an apartment and got into a vehicle. As they attempted to apprehend him, there was gunfire. Lieutenant Brady in the Sheriff's Office, which is investigating the shooting, heard that the suspect was carrying a gun, but he did not immediately know whether the suspect fired a weapon. Now, a warrant had been issued by Portland police earlier Thursday on the same day that Vice News, a trash website, I will remind you all, published an interview with this Antifa piece of shit, in which he appeared to admit to the shooting, saying, quote, "I had no choice." Bitch, we have you on video. We know for a fact that you headhunted Jay. We know that for a fact. It is on camera, you dumbass. Portland police had been investigating Saturday's shooting death of Aaron J. Danielson, known as Jay by his Patriot Prayer brothers. The Antifa piece of shit had been a persistent presence at the demonstrations in Portland over the recent weeks, helping the protesters with security and suggesting on social media that the struggle was becoming a war where there will be casualties. He sounds like a stand-up guy. "I'm 100% Antifa all the way," he posted on Instagram. "I'm willing to fight for my brothers and sisters, even if some of them are too ignorant to realize what Antifa truly stands for. We do not want violence, but we will not run from it either." Yeah, you did. You ran from the cops, and it cost you your life, you piece of shit. In the Vice interview, Antifa piece of shit said he acted in self-defense, believing that he and a friend were about to be stabbed. Quote, "I could have sat there and watched them kill a friend of mine of color, but I wasn't going to do that," he said. Antifa piece of shit, as I've said before, you were on camera. You were recorded. We could hear you saying, "There's one of them, get him," or something to that effect, on camera. We heard you say it. Ahem. On July 5th, during the protests, Antifa piece of shit was charged with resisting arrest and possession of a loaded firearm, but the case was later dropped. At the end of July, he showed a bloodied arm to a journalist and said he'd been shot while intervening in a fight. So you're a terrorist piece of shit. Now, Reese Monson, a leader in the local protest movement who also helps organize security, said all the people who help with security in Portland, including Antifa piece of shit, were trained in de-escalation. De-escalation. He was excellent at that. Yeah, well, apparently not. He couldn't use them to save himself. How ironic. Mr. Monson and Antifa piece of shit would often come over to discuss how to appropriately handle potential agitators. The night of the shooting began with a large crowd of supporters of Mr. Trump gathering in the suburbs. Yeah, again, I'm going to emphasize this for people who are not in the know. The Trump supporters of Portland are the people protesting in Portland. They are locals. They are the average Joes. The Trump supporters in Portland are not being bussed in from other places. They're not part of Antifa Central. They are people who belong there, people who love their community. They are not in any way affiliated with the looters and rioters who often come across state lines. They plan to drive hundreds of vehicles carrying flags around the highways of Portland, but many of them eventually drove downtown where protesters have been congregating regularly. It doesn't matter where the protesters are, everyone else has a right to be there too. End of discussion. Once there, some Trump supporters shot paintballs into the crowd while people in the streets threw objects back at them. Some fistfights broke out. As the evening turned to night, video appears to show Mr. Danielson, Jay, the member of Patriot Prayer, who was wearing a hat with the insignia of the Patriot Prayer, and Antifa piece of shit on the street along with a few other people. One person was shouting, "We got a couple right here." Yes, because they singled them out and they wanted to target them. They murdered Jay in cold blood. The man who captured the video of the shooting said it appeared Danielson reached to his hip. He pulled from his side like he was pulling a gun. Yeah, that's not how Patriot Prayer rolls. But in the other video shot during the encounter, someone can be heard flagging that Jay was pulling out a can of mace. He's macing you, he's pulling it out, the person warned. So, Jay was pulling out a can of mace to repel the people trying to assault him and the other Patriot Prayer member he was with. It appeared from the video that Jay sprayed mace just as 2 gunshots could be heard. Because he was murdered in cold blood by Antifa piece of shit. You know, this is why Kyle Rittenhouse is a fucking hero. Because it doesn't matter with Antifa. It really does not matter. They have made it clear that with them, the only thing that works is deadly force. Antifa piece of shit, no, this is hilarious, said in his social media post that he was once in the army and hated it. Although an army official said no record of service could be found under his name, and in a Bloomberg interview, Antifa piece of shit described himself as a professional snowboarder and a contractor. So he's a stolen valor piece of shit too. Just putting that out there. So here we have someone who's willing to obviously lie. But let's go a little more. His daughter, Antifa piece of shit, was on the scene during the July interview. He said she had been present during the encounter that left his arm bloodied. The fact is that she is going to be contributing to running this new country that we're fighting for, said Antifa piece of shit, and she's going to learn everything on the street, not by what people have said. Piece of shit's sister, who asked to remain anonymous because of family receiving numerous threatening phone calls, said police have asked for screenshots from videos from the night of the shooting looked like her brother. She said they did, but she said she had not seen him since 3 years ago, when she said family members broke off contact with Antifa piece of shit after escalating conflict. So he's also, probably a member of, domestic or family violence. At the beginning of June, isn't it just funny how all of this just kind of falls together to form the perfect profile of the exact kind of piece of shit you expect to find in regards to Antifa? I'm honestly surprised we haven't learned he's a pedophile yet. At the beginning of June, in the days after the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis triggered nationwide protests, Antifa piece of shit began posting about the need for change. Things are bad right now and they can only get worse, he posted on June 3rd. But that is how radical change comes about. A few days later, authorities in eastern Oregon reported that Antifa piece of shit was apparently racing his 17-year-old son as the two were driving in separate vehicles at over 100 miles per hour. Among other violations, authorities cited Antifa piece of shit with driving under the influence, unlawful possession of a firearm, and driving while uninsured. This is just an upstanding citizen. Now, I don't care so much about, racing down the street and all that whatnot. But what gets to me is the stolen valor. Lying about having served in the army is true. It is peak piece of shit. But this claim that he goes on this interview with Vice and says, "Oh, I wanted to protect my friend of color." Meanwhile, it's known to everyone at the time that Jay was pulling out a can of mace. It was announced by one of his cohorts that he was pulling out a can of mace. It was cited right here. We got a couple right here. That Jay was hunted and murdered in cold blood. And when the police went to apprehend him, he chose to commit suicide by cop, and I am not shedding a single tear. Justice was served.